Welcome to Chamber Chat. I'm John Terre, President and CEO of the Boulder Chamber, and I welcome you to another edition of our conversation with business leaders from around our community who are addressing issues that are important, not only to our businesses and the economy, but the community at large. And today we're going to have an excellent conversation, very important conversation about some of the issues that are confronting our efforts to improve or increase the availability of diverse housing stock, as well as some of the challenges some of our commercial businesses face when they're redeveloping in our community. All things that we want to see, hopefully, our council address in their upcoming work plan discussions during the retreat this coming weekend. And we have excellent guests who are going to be speaking with about that. First of all, we have Danica Powell, who is the owner and founder of the Trestle strategy group, very involved with development issues in our community and around the region. And then we have Eli Feldman, who is the president of Conscious Bay Company, which is a commercial property owner and also a developer of housing opportunities in our community. So we're going to talk with them about their experience in those areas in development in our community and some of the solutions that they would have to help advance our goals in those areas for better housing diversity opportunities, as well as our strengthening our economy. But before we get started with them, just a couple of quick announcements from the Boulder Chamber. First, I want to make sure you know that we have a BYP happy hour coming up. That's next Wednesday, and it's going to be at a wonderful restaurant in town, Frank's Chophouse, owned by Frank Day. I think many of you are familiar with him and his legacy in our community. And so now he has this great steakhouse. And so we're going to have a wonderful happy hour there, bringing together the Boulder Young Professionals Group. And as I always say, BYP and me. So all of you are invited to attend. It should be a great event. And then second, we have our first meeting of the Business Women's Leadership Group, and that's going to be on February 9. Always interesting conversation, but just a great gathering of business women leaders in our community for networking and developing their businesses. So urge you to plan to attend, put that on your calendar. That's in the morning at 8 o'clock, February 9th, the first meeting of the Business Women's Leadership Group. Okay, enough from the Boulder Chamber announcement side of things. Let's get started with our guests. And so I'm going to welcome and put on a split screen here so we can see them throughout the conversation, Eli Feldman and Danica Powell. And so welcome to you both to Chamber Chat. Appreciate you being with us.
Hey, John.
Hey, Danica.
Hi, John.
Yeah, hey, Eli. I should note that Danica is a board director at the Boulder Chamber too. So great to have her on our team here. So I'm just going to get started. And why don't I start with you, Danica? Maybe if you can just talk a little bit about your personal experience with development in our community, and then some of the lessons you've learned about maybe some of the challenges that you face that are unique to Boulder.
Sure. Well, I've been working on what I call entitlements, taking projects through the approval process since about 2006. And so that's been quite a journey. I started with a big hotel project at the Golden Buff back before the economic downturn. And in that time period, I've worked probably on maybe hundreds of projects in Boulder. I also was on the planning board for a short stint of 3 years to actually look at what that side was. Had been on the consultant side for so long, I thought what would be like to be on the decision-making side. So I did that a few years ago. And now I have my own company, and we really work with all sorts of developers, nonprofits, affordable housing developers to help them get through primarily the City of Boulder process. I work in some other communities, but Boulder keeps me very busy. And so I think you asked what some of the challenges are. I think just starting with the fact that we have such a lengthy and cost expensive and risky entitlement process really creates the opportunity for those who have a lot of resources and time and risk tolerance to undergo the process. So that weeds out pretty quickly a lot of our nonprofits, a lot of our small businesses, a lot of our local developers or mom and pops who want to do something good for the community. I think that because the process to get approvals is so challenging, expensive, and risky, it really just eliminates a lot of great projects. So I think that really breaks my heart when I meet with people and see that they just can't withstand kind of that length and risk. And so what we do see is a lot of larger corporations and developers be able to move forward and take on a 2 or 3 year entitlement process. What was your third part of your question, John?
I'm gonna hold off on that third part. I'm
Okay.
gonna ask Eli.
Okay.
If maybe I can just get from you just some of the history that you have working in Boulder, and then some of the things that you think are uniquely challenging maybe about the development process in Boulder.
Sure. Hi, John. Hi, Danica. Yeah, we started our company here in Boulder 11 years ago. We own and operate lots of different types of real estate, from industrial warehouses to retail, offices, all kinds of property types. One thing that we kind of specialize in is large land holdings, and we have large pieces of land in areas that are, central in an area called Boulder Junction, land along 28th Street, which is, one of the most developed corridors in the city. And we actually haven't developed anything on those properties. And I think that's really, that's really the point. Let me just explain a little bit why. One of the main reasons is that the zoning just doesn't allow for housing development on some of those sites, or it only allows for a pretty low density scenario. And if you're a landowner looking at what you can do with your property, what's called a by right project, something that you can build, it's just not that attractive when you look at the zoning that's in place for our properties, unless you're going to build high-end for sale condos. That seems to work pretty well under the existing code. Or if you're going to build affordable housing using the benefit of low interest tax credit financing, which can really boost your returns. So the high end and the low end are getting built. That's what we've gotten a lot of. It's not a surprise. That's exactly what the code and the economy demand, essentially. So that's one piece of it. That's not really an interest of ours in doing either of those at the moment, specifically. The affordable housing could be, but the LIHTC tax credits are very, very competitive and can take many years to secure. But then there's another element to it, which Danica pointed out, is the unpredictability of our process in Boulder. Particularly for larger projects. Most applications end up needing or requesting some kind of a variance or a waiver, as we just saw in the Diagonal Plaza project, and almost every significant project comes to council or the planning board with a request, and then it becomes an open negotiation. And the result is unpredictable. The only thing that's predictable is that it takes a very long time to get to the end. So as your chamber members know, unpredictability is not exactly the best thing for making investments. So those are some of the things that I've seen that are challenging for us and have led us not to pursue development on some of our properties.
Well, maybe you can speak, Eli, to you've already sort of both addressed it to some extent, but maybe just a sharper point on it. What are some of the consequences that you've seen, either for your commercial tenants or for projects of interest to the community, due to some of these challenges that you've experienced?
Yeah, I mean, I think we all know what the consequences are. As construction of housing gets more expensive, the cost of housing gets more expensive. That's the number one issue that we're dealing with. And that drives the rest, which is people end up living farther from where they work. That drives a transportation issue. And we have in commuting 60,000 people commuting into the city every day, at least when our offices are open. That grows our carbon footprint. That's counter to city's goals. And businesses have trouble recruiting and retaining employees. The restaurants that we have in some of our other spaces, or offices, nonprofits, they're having a hard time because their employees would rather work in a community where they could live more affordably and they could live closer to where they work. You can't blame them. And we're losing diversity. we're losing artists, we're losing nonprofits, we're losing, we're losing the richness of our community as a result.
Yeah, these are exceptionally important issues, things that we're addressing at the Chamber through our Boulder Together program. But there are needs that we have for our council to address these issues. But I just, before we get to some maybe solutions, Danica, what similar kind of sense of the impacts of these challenges that developers face in our community?
Well, I think that it results, I mean, if we're specifically talking about affordable housing, it results in less units. I think, we're just getting less units built at a slower pace. We have some pretty aggressive housing goals for the community of 15% affordability. But if it takes a project 12 to 18 to 24 months to get through a process, that's 24 months that we didn't have those units. And then you tie that to what Eli was talking about, which is construction costs and land costs, which we haven't probably touched on, which is not within our control. You've ended up with a very expensive product. And so that gets you to the very high end. And then we actually create a ton of subsidy for ourselves through this private development. We collect money for affordable housing, and that really helps fund the lower end. But everybody keeps talking about this middle income, attainable housing, something that's less than $1 million, but more than $200,000. And so we're just missing that opportunity. And so I think all of these things compounded, I'm going to get into fees maybe now or later, they also add a ton of cost to the project, which has to be recuperated. So, I estimated a couple years ago that for each housing unit built, it's about $50,000 in just paper fees. That's just permits, tap fees, process fees, getting through the site review process. And I'm not talking about consultants or design or architecture. I'm just talking about $50,000 a unit. And then maybe your land cost is $150,000 a unit. You can see the math, and then your construction cost is probably $200,000 or $300,000 a unit. There you go. You're already at $1 million. So we need to eliminate some of the things that can bring that cost down, or create more subsidy to provide the housing that we truly want to see.
I get it. Well, council is going to be going into their retreat to establish their work plan for the coming year, but I'm sure it'll have impact on the next 2 years of their council term. And I'm wondering, just given some of these scenarios you laid out, the complication and the challenges, the undermining of what I think are not just business and economic goals, but community goals. Wondering if you have priority solutions, maybe process improvements or programs that you think would be priorities or should be priorities for council in addressing these issues. So Danica, I was wondering, you were on a roll there, so I wonder if you.
Well, yeah, and I'll talk mostly about affordable housing and small businesses. I work on affordable housing throughout the region. I'm part of the Boulder County Regional Housing Partnership. We work with all the jurisdictions in the county. So for example, Longmont waives fees. That would be a very simple thing to, help achieve and build more housing. They also have expedited process. They have blueprints for ADUs. They built into their code things that make it easier. I think we have not eliminated the things that make it hard, and we have not put in anything that makes it easier. Hence, people need to hire consultants to get them through the process. So they also have the ability, I believe, in Longmont to have, they've hired an ombudsman. So if a church or a nonprofit or a affordable housing developer wants to do something, but they don't have the real estate development experience, the city can assign them a consultant to help them navigate the process and get through that successfully. So I think there's just a lot of solutions. Affordable housing should be the easiest thing we build. And in fact, it's probably one of the hardest, has a lot of neighborhood opposition as well. So that requires a lot of resources and consultants. And then the other thing that I really am focused on is supporting small businesses. I get caught up helping small businesses go through use review. And it just is it kind of blows my mind that we have to, I'm working with a judo facility, a martial arts facility in a strip mall, and they have to go through a 6 to 9 month, process to just get their use approved. They're not changing any square footage. They're not building anything. And I just think a lot of those barriers to small businesses should be eliminated quickly. And, that we should level the scales for whether you're a large hotel or if you're just a really small user or a dental office or a chiropractor. We all want to see those things in our neighborhoods, and they have to go through the same processes that large hotels do and other big projects. So yeah, I would propose both of those fixes.
That's a great series of fixes, and hopefully then council would hear that. And I'm wondering, Eli, do you have other priorities that or similar priorities as Danica outlined that you would recommend council pursue?
Well, just to add on, I think, we need less planning and more doing. That's what we need in this city. We are engaged constantly in long-range planning. We are devoting resources to that continuously, looking at East Boulder and North Boulder and the airport, and looking at all of these areas that won't see a house for 10 or 20 years. Yet we're deploying our city resources now when they're extremely stressed and spread thin. And at the same time, we have opportunities to add housing way more quickly in a bigger way in the core of our city. That's transit served in areas that have already gone through exhaustive planning processes. And I'm speaking specifically about Boulder Junction and the second phase of Boulder Junction. And the power is in the city's hands. Its land use and zoning authority can govern what gets built. They just need to get out in front of it, be proactive, and use that power. This is not a problem that's unique to Boulder. It's, many cities struggle to be proactive and really ask for what they want. And leaders just seem to fear moving too fast without extensive public outreach and process. But I fear the opposite way more, moving too slow. Time is the enemy. The housing crisis is not patient. And we act like we have all the time in the world. We clearly do not. And so it's a mind shift for the city, for the staff and the council and the planning board, for everybody to realize that, there are things we can do now to get some wins now when we need it. And we just had a fire, last month. We lost another 1,000 homes overnight in our community. Those people don't have 20 years to wait for the planning reserve to materialize. We need to act now. And we have plans in place specifically in Boulder Junction that are totally ready to go. That cake is baked. Just blow out the candles. If you can even imagine doing that anymore, if you're allowed to blow out candles on a birthday cake, but
you have to wait.
You get the point. I mean, it's just less planning and more action.
Yeah, I want to add on to that a little bit. I mean, having come from the planning board when I served almost 10, 11 years ago, the TVAP, the Transit Village Area Plan, was, a shining document. It was an area plan that looked at transportation. It brought RTD to our town. It was supposed to bring the light rail, but we built the first phase. It's complete. And, there's an area plan in place for phase 2. And as someone who sits on a lot of projects where the neighborhood screams, we need an area plan, don't do this, don't build in diagonal until you have an area plan, or we need an area plan for Alpine Balsam. Hey, or we have an area plan, it's already approved, it's already decided what the land uses are, it's in the core of our city. It probably would have little controversy if implemented and would bring transit that is much is necessary. So as the planner who's been around since this was conceived, I think it's time, as Eli said, to just implement it, pull the plug, keep focusing on these horizon projects because we can't let go of those, but just do the simple things. And I think that's just hard in this time of overthinking and everything's controversial. And, we got to be bold about some of our decisions, and we are way past the housing crisis. And so that could be another couple thousand units that could be built in the core of our city in the next few years.
Beautiful sentiments, and I appreciate your sense of urgency around what is a crisis for our community. It's housing for the diversity of our workforce. It's important workforce for our businesses that drive our economy. And as both of you, I think, articulated well, it's about the character and diversity of our community that creates the richness that so much of us appreciate. So I thank you both for helping us to just think through some of the or understand some of the challenges that you who are working on these development issues in our community, housing, affordable housing, all business needs. And thank you for also thinking through solutions. And we will share these this type of input with our city council, and hopefully they'll prioritize some of these solutions. But again, thank you so much, Danica Powell with Trestle Strategy Group and Eli Feldman with Conscience Bay. Really appreciate you guys in your time. And I'm just going to quickly switch to full view, so you get a look at me as I close this out. And thank you all for joining us here on another edition of Chamber Chat. Just remember, we have our first BYP event coming up. It's next Wednesday. It's going to be at Frank's Chophouse, and I know you're going to enjoy that. And then also we have our Business Women's Leadership Group event, the first gathering in the morning of that strong group of business women leaders for connections. That's on February 9 at 8 o'clock. And as I like to say, when we are still in these COVID times, make sure to stay safe out there. We want to get past this, drop those COVID numbers, and that means sometimes wearing that mask. And we'll see you next time on Chamber Chat.